الذين لا يعلمون إنما يتذكر أولو الألباب.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Knowledge Revival Podcast, or Revival of Knowledge Podcast. We got a guest today. An unruly territory in Columbus, Ohio. First time in a while. You've been here how many times, Sheikh?
I've been here, I came here in 15, 17,
MashaAllah. 21.
18, and 21.
18 and 21. So this is your fifth time.
Fifth time, yeah.
MashaAllah. Our guest, Sheikh Abdullahi Bihi, Ghani Ani Tarif. We're not really going to get into the whole, who are you, tell us about yourself. People know you by now.
No.
Whether they like it or not. Whether they like it or not. Alhamdulillah. So we're here. Your trip here in Columbus, Ohio was a trip twofold. Two different kind of vibes to it. Two different portions to it.
Yeah.
One was the capacity of Sheikh teaching Dawah, teaching. And the other capacity as a friend, coming for a friend's wedding. Friend visiting me. Not really a friend, will lie. More so a person I look up to, a person I respect highly. MashaAllah. So this podcast, to kind of let you know what's going on, to bring you into house. This podcast is called the Revival of Knowledge Podcast. Obviously, it's a podcast that's designed for the student of knowledge to benefit from different levels of student knowledge. There's the people that are more advanced, so we give them gems. People that are beginners, we give them things that they need. Nice. People that are intermediate. So just to start us off, Sheikh, the culture of drinking tea, right? Culture of drinking tea, having tea, conversations. People like different types of tea. What's your favorite type of tea? We'll start there.
Favorite type of tea, okay. That was interesting. I didn't expect that.
I know, curveball. That's how I do.
Okay, I see. Curveball. Nice.
By the way, we have a live studio audience, so if they laugh in the background, inshallah, I hope they can get used to it. An audience of two. Alhamdulillah.
In terms of tea, probably either Moroccan mint or like just a normal chai tea. Adeni, Somali.
The first time I had Moroccan tea, I was in Saudi.
Yeah.
And the students over there, they put me onto that. I didn't know it was like putting mint in tea. That was like I didn't know it was a vibe.
Yeah.
MashaAllah.
It's nice, pretty good. But you got to get the right one though. The ones at coffee shops and those places there.
Yeah.
Dyed versions.
You got to have somebody make it.
You got to have it like homemade.
With care.
Yeah.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Sheikh, you studied overseas in Saudi. Yeah. Tell me about a moment of culture shock that you had as a student of knowledge, because I know that's a moment that every student goes through in travel. Going and studying overseas. Tell me about the time you had a culture shock moment. You were like, whoa, what's going on here? I'm out of my depth, out of Minnesota.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, culture shock was, this is before the age of social media. So I think social media made people aware of certain cultures before what's going on because of just TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, YouTube. You just see different parts of the world. We know what's going on in North Korea now. Yeah. Just because of
random places.
Random places.
Somebody posts a selfie.
Yeah.
Volcano behind them, whatever, something.
But before social media, you really don't know.
Except you don't know what you're walking into.
You don't know what you're walking into. And it was the concept of wearing thobes. We didn't really used to wear thobes like that, except in special occasions. Yeah. But the culture shock was, when I went over there, they used to, the first day. Yeah. And people walking into the bathroom with thobes. And I'm thobe to us is a little bit. Yeah. It's you respect events, elegance. That was a little culture shock. Right. People having pajamas as thobes. Yeah. Going to the bathroom, sleeping with their thobes.
That's crazy.
It's like, what? I've never seen that before. I've seen Ma'wis, so
it's part of our culture.
So that was normal. Yeah. But the thobe, that was a whole different.
A thobe is different.
But I guess for many people nowadays, that's normal. They know that. Right. But before social media, you wouldn't really know that unless.
And back in those days, a thobe meant a person was like a sheikh. I remember I had a similar moment. I seen a guy playing a guitar. Yeah. He was probably like a Saudi singer or something like that. He was playing a guitar and he's wearing a thobe and he's wearing it. And I'm like, what's going on? Sheikh, you're in the wrong. You're in the wrong field. You got to go back to where you're from.
Or he's wearing a bisht and
then he's doing that. The whole. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's interesting, man. MashaAllah. So culture shock is a moment that a lot of people go through. What was a culture shock with regards to talabul ilm? What is something that shocked you about being a student of knowledge? I think a lot of people, when they get into it, one of the things, I'll give just an example to kind of get the question along. is memorization, importance of memorization. Going from dichotomy of Western education system, you're used to multiple choice questions, you're used to like, just the simple stuff. Like you understand the concept, you're good to go. Versus in Talab al-Ilm, in Islamic studies, that's like, you gotta memorize things. Right? So what's a moment similar to that, kind of like a different, like you were like, this is so different about studying the deen as opposed to what you're used to?
That's a very tough question because that's a good question.
I like tough questions.
I got to think about that. I need a moment to think about it because I think where I came from was kind of similar in terms of the way things were studied.
Yeah.
And the culture that I come from, like the state we come from.
Yeah. We
had that culture already. So I wouldn't say anything is surprising, except maybe in university, in academic settings. There's the university is completely different. Yeah. The halaqats were pretty much the same. The ones we had back home, a lot of the things similar, very similar. Yeah. Nothing shocking.
Like the sheikh, the halaqats is like at the masjid.
The halaqats is the masjid, yeah. The
so the sheikh gives you the lecture. The lectures, everybody takes notes the best they can.
That was normal. And then the transition was normal.
Yeah.
But the university.
Yeah, classroom setting, the university academic setting is a little bit different because there's a focus on critical thinking. Yeah. But also how I would say it's a little bit easier. It's not as demanding in terms of the university.
Yeah. Okay. The university workload. So they had, like, for example, university settings, you have 4 or 5 classes, 15 credits over here in the West, right? Yeah. Over there you get 8, 9 classes.
8, 9 classes.
Yeah. Over
like 20 credits.
23 credits, 25 credits sometimes, 22.
Wow.
So just a lot of classes. Yeah. But no workload. There's barely any homework. So you might take 1 exam or 2 midterms.
So you think it's like kind of like the way I'm thinking now is like it's basically those halaqat at the masjid now transformed to a classroom, right? It's kind of like that.
Originally, that was the goal, but then it kind of went out of hand. It kind of turned into more university setting where you may not go through the entire book. You may go through parts of the book. You may, stuff like that.
To get to the point of the book, basically. Like,
you understand the book and whatnot. But there's no workload. There's not a lot of homework. There's nothing. Like compared to the West where there's a whole syllabus.
Right.
Every week you're doing something.
You're quiz. 4 or 5 weeks ahead of.
Yeah. But here, this is just a midterm, 2 midterms. And then they just all come around the same time. Right. So you have like 7 midterms in 2 weeks. Right. So that was a little bit different. I wouldn't say it's a shock, but it was just different.
It was different.
I would say it's a little bit easier because having a workload of doing, if you have 4 classes, but each class you have a paper or a quiz or research or a midterm.
3 hours of study to it outside of class.
Yeah, you don't have to do that for this unless somebody has a weak background, their Arabic is weak.
They're catching up.
They're playing catch up. But somebody has just an average background, they can get by. You can get by with, so I would say that was a little bit different. I wouldn't say shocking though. Yeah.
You said something about the university teaches you critical thinking. How important is that for a talib al-ilm? Like critical thinking is, because when I think about critical thinking, we're thinking about 2 different ways but when I think about critical thinking, I'm thinking like the teacher gives me a concept, and I analyze that concept to a point where I say, how do I get to first understanding this concept, then application, applying the concept, or even is this concept something that is even worthy of application? You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Like if we could use an example, sometimes like there's a lot of things in terms of the ulum in Islam that are in the books. Like right here you have the hadith of the library, you have the hadith category behind you. Some people say all of this mustalah stuff is like the work is done. Ilm al-Rijal, all the men who narrated are known. You don't have to do any Tasheeh Tad'if in 2025. Just go after whoever it is, go after them. Khalas, you're good. And then other people are like, no, actually, we need to practice that. We need to put it into... You see what I'm saying? So that level of critical thinking for student knowledge, what do you think about that? How does that play a role? And what is your tasawwur of the critical thinking that you're talking about? Also,
I think there's 2 different issues. Firstly is the methodology of learning. Right, the methodology of learning has to be a combination between comprehension and also storing the information. Yeah, you have to have both. They're both 2 wings of a bird. Yeah, Western education focuses on critical thinking and understanding the concept, which is important. That's the end goal. Yeah, but one of the things that helps understanding critically is storing the information. Right. And in the Eastern world, in the Muslim world, unfortunately, we just focus on download. Literally,
Yeah.
we just store the information.
Download, upload.
But we may not know download, upload. Basically, we don't know how to analyze.
Right.
You know, we don't know how to do data analysis. If you know what I mean,
Mm.
you got to have both.
Right.
So I would say, yeah, critical thinking is very important, and that's the end goal. If you look at which one is more important, this one is more important in the long run.
Right.
But one helps the other. Memorization helps critical thinking.
Right.
But if you make memorization the end goal, that defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Like
that's
you said,
in
you're a
terms
storage
of,
house.
Yeah,
The person becomes a storage house.
storage house
Yeah.
basically.
Mm.
So that's in terms of the methodology of learning.
Yeah.
In terms of the sciences and what is needed and what is beneficial, yes, definitely the sciences that in which you can contribute more are mostly in the sciences that have more critical thinking aspects to it.
Right.
You can contribute more. But that is not one of the goals of knowledge. Sometimes goals of knowledge is not to contribute. Sometimes it's just to preserve.
Yeah.
Just to have
Keep
something.
this tradition
Keep
alive.
this tradition alive. And also, there is still in those sciences like hadith that you mentioned, there's still a lot of hadith that need to be
looked at.
And then there's also a hadith in which there's khilaf between the ulama.
Yeah.
So there's things you can still look at. There's not, we can't say is adim al-faida.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, there's interlapping between the sciences. Maybe an entire issue is based off of a hadith. You can't just keep going back to the books and going back to terminologies and going back to, you kind of have to save time, you have to have some type of knowledge background in hadith to understand some of these issues.
Exactly.
But hadith is just an example. That's
That's just
scapegoat.
Exactly. It's an example.
But definitely there are some sciences that are more beneficial generally.
Yeah.
For the people.
I would say, Sheikh, more alive. More beneficial, yes, of course. But I would say more alive in that their growth and the contributions that come into it, and also the collective psyche and the people, how they interact with it, that science is alive. You know, it lives, and it's being used day to day. Like fiqh. Fiqh is constantly changing. There's always growth. There's always the usul and the stuff like the foundational principles are there, but there's always a new perspective. There's always a new thing that comes out.
So, but there, I would say there's like two different types of sciences because you need to do fiqh to understand fiqh, to give fatwa, to give verdicts.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain level of knowledge in hadith.
Yeah.
Right. You have to have a certain knowledge in usul fiqh, a certain knowledge in Arabic.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain level.
Yeah.
So you need those ulum.
You got to be
to
able
apply.
to get in the door.
Yeah. So yeah, fiqh was always going to be alive, and it will be alive, and it will
Yeah.
continue to be alive.
Right.
But that's because the whole science is based off day-to-day actions.
Right.
Whereas hadith is an evidence.
Yeah.
And evidence is not it's two different sciences. I don't think it's comparing apples and oranges.
Yeah.
They're two different sciences. One is a derivative science,
Right.
and one is a source science that is a source.
Right.
It's an evidence that you use, and determining its authenticity is a ada.
Right.
Is a tool that you use.
It's
It's an assistant discipline. So I think comparing those sciences a little bit more.
It's like the crude oil versus the gasoline. Like you got the people digging for the oil, getting their hands dirty, black gold.
Yeah.
And then you got your car running. It's like, you know what I mean? There's a process in between.
Yeah.
And then you get petroleum jelly from the crude oil. It's interesting,
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's an interesting analogy. That's an interesting analogy.
I just, I let my mind wander sometimes. That's my problem.
You've been in the gas industry, I know you've been in a lot of industries.
Oh, man. It makes me think about, because you said data analytics and analyzing the data, getting the data in. ChatGPT. Nowadays you got AI. You have unfiltered amounts of information coming through this artificial intelligence, human-made, man-made mind, brain, right? And sometimes it could, it could take you. So, what's your thoughts on AI, the usage of AI in
I think knowledge has become much more accessible over the years, but people have become more ignorant. So we just see like books behind us right now.
Right.
You have to have manuscript. You have to go to a teacher,
Yeah.
copy his whatever he has.
Yeah, or listen
and you
to him
have
and write from his.
or listen to him and write it down.
Yeah.
That. Now you have books.
Right.
What happened to people?
Right.
Nothing. Then came what? These books are uploaded as PDFs.
Yeah, digitized.
Digitized.
Yeah.
And what happened? And now ChatGPT, and even ChatGPT and all these other AI platforms, they're not very accurate. I've seen some
They're not.
made up a hadith.
Yeah.
The other day I seen an Ethel. He just made it up.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was talking to him about something else, and then he just mentioned an Ethel of some random, I think Ibn Mas'ud.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Where'd you get this
I
from?
searched the Ethel, and it's completely different. It's not even in the same topic, so it's not accurate to even decipher and to understand.
Yeah.
No, they might update it to where it becomes more accurate.
They've updated ChatGPT now. Back in the day, ChatGPT used to lie. It used to lie outright.
Yeah.
You would say, "What's the 115th surah in the Quran?" and it will throw you something.
Yes.
It'll say surah whatever, right? Yeah. But as time went on, people, because artificial intelligence is basically you're testing it and you're teaching the machine it's like you have a kid and the kid just lies and you tell him, hey, don't lie, and now he tells the truth. Like it learns, right? So they started telling the machines like, yo, listen, don't be making up stuff. So now if you ask ChatGPT what's the 115th ayah, they'll say there is no 115th ayah. You're tripping me out. Stop playing with me. So
I think everybody has a different experience with it, but I still see the guy. I still see the guy.
Lies to you.
Not only is he lying, but he's so confident in his lies.
He's confident. He's very confident. So a funny thing that happened to me, the poem, the Durra in Qira'at. The end of it where he mentions the lines about being in Unayza and I was asking ChatGPT to find that line for. I was trying to see if it could search the web for it. So I said, find the rest of this line. So I gave him the first two beginnings of the sadr of the bait, and it made up its own thing. It made up its own entire poem. I was like, this is not what was in that was not the original. And it's really interesting because now people are using it in schools and academia, and it's almost like an unfiltered usage of it. I'm thinking though, what kind of positive could come from using something like? Because I know we talk about the negatives a lot, with technology. Every time technology comes out, people are like, like when books, and printing and this kind of stuff, we're like, yo, maybe we shouldn't do that. We're gonna lose. And there is negative drawback. But what are some of the positives that could come from?
Perhaps some of the positives is probably some of the more technical works that you have to do in research and review. Yeah, it can kind of help you in that. Yeah, I would say that's the number one benefit. Sure. Part of it. It could save you time in terms of the way you organize your notes, the way you put together your research, or the way that kind of stuff, right? But in terms of the academic side, I think that maybe the updated versions in the next coming years might be more beneficial. But you have to have a certain level of knowledge to even decipher what is right and what is wrong.
100%.
And I wouldn't recommend for most people that ChatGPT could be a source right now because you don't even know. Like, you have to have a certain level of knowledge to even determine whether something
to know if this is made up or not.
Yeah, but there is beneficial in terms of organizing certain things, helping you with certain matters, stuff like that. Yeah, I think it's still. I don't know. Technology is something that is an ally. You could use it for benefit, and it could be something that is harmful. I feel like we shouldn't have pessimistic views on anything that comes out.
On anything,
Yeah, we should look at it objectively and benefit from whatever we can, and whatever is not good, we avoid it.
Pessimism is like a good word because oftentimes like pessimism, cynicism, being like just doubtful in a negative way to where it's harmful. A lot of Muslims suffer from that. Like, what do you think? Maybe is like.
I mean, the Prophet ﷺ said it best in Hadith Sahih Muslim. What do you say? Man qala halaka an-nas fa huwa ahlakum. Whoever says, people are done for 2025. So what happened to them?
Right.
People are what?
They're finished now.
They're finished now.
Because you said they're finished.
They're finished, yeah.
Right.
So optimism is khair. The Prophet ﷺ says al-fa'lu khair. Right? وَيُعْجِبُنِ الْفَعْلُ كما قيل. That he was amazed by al-fa'l, which is optimism.
Right.
And when he was asked what is al-fa'l, قال الكلمة الطيبة.
Exactly.
All right, good speech.
Telling yourself something good.
Yeah. So, pessimism is a problem in our community. We're just negative all the time. Yeah. We shouldn't be negative. We should be positive. We should be optimistic. But we also shouldn't live in a naive, idealistic world. We should be realistic. There's a balance to everything. Right? So we should be a balanced nation. But the asl is that we're positive and optimistic. Yeah.
Hopeful,
yes.
Hopeful as well. Between hope and fear. Kind of unsure about the future, but at the same time worry about right now. Stay in the game, like you said, in the Dawah.
Yeah.
You mentioned about, yesterday's the past, tomorrow's a mystery, today's the present. Really interesting. There's something you mentioned about organizing notes, taking notes. One of the brothers asked me to make a topic in the podcast about something like this, but maybe now we can just ask you, because you're with us, some of the tips with regards to note taking. What helps you? Also, how do you know what to write in terms of notes? Sometimes the sheikh is speaking and he's saying a lot of great things, but I can't write all of the great things that he's saying because everything he's saying is great. You see what I'm saying? So maybe shed some light on the concept of note taking, which we do in our taking notes.
I think note taking is just experience.
Experience.
Everybody has their own route.
Okay.
Just be in the game for a long time, and then you will be able to know what to write and what not to write. I could give you a way, but that works for me. It may not work for another person.
Right.
But a person should focus on understanding the concept and then writing down whatever they can. Right. But note taking. So some people, they don't even take notes.
They don't. Some
and
people
that's a
just
problem.
listen.
العلم صيد والكتابة قيده. قيد صيودك بالحبال الواثقة. They say the knowledge is like hunting. So imagine somebody going to hunt or just going fishing and he doesn't even have the rods. Doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Why'd you come here?
Why you didn't bring no hooks?
Yeah, so that doesn't make any sense. So you gotta write.
Right.
How to write, what to write. You're gonna struggle in the beginning, but that's part of the process. Struggle until you get experience, and then you'll know what to write, what not to write. Go back to, if you need to go back to the tapes, this, that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's more of a personal experience everybody has to go through, not a certain way. Yeah.
What works for you? What worked for you in your experience in terms of writing notes? What was like one of the things that you said? You know, is it writing athna ad-dars when the teacher's speaking, or do you kind of like record and listen to it later on when you get home? Or you just kind of like, you know, Bukhari, you just hear it and that's it.
I think if you teach yourself to always re-listen to a recording, and you're gonna burn out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to just teach yourself how to write very fast.
Oh, okay.
During the class, and knowing what to write.
What to write down.
What to write, right? أسرع يا أخي في ثلاثة. الأكل والمشي والكتابة. There's three things that a student of knowledge should always be fast in eating, and walking, and writing. So you gotta be writing like a doctor. You see how he writes? Very ugly, but it's fast. So you gotta be very fast. Yeah. You can't worry about the aesthetics.
Something
you have
that helped me was like also rumuz, like just having acronyms or, you know, things that you'll remember, that you know that you will remember, or just for the sake of the lesson right now, get it quickly, and then later on correct it or add more to it. You know,
you can do that as well. I mean, those kind of things are whatever works for a person.
Right.
If they want to write their own code language,
right, that's
up to them. But I think it's just a personal experience.
It's a personal experience.
You gotta work. You just gotta be in class, but listen to the recording every time. Maybe in the beginning you could do that, but you're gonna burn out eventually. Yeah. And then now, neither did you learn note taking, and you heavily depended on what? Yeah. Re-listening to audios, which might work for a while, but then after a while you might get too busy to do that.
Or you get in a situation where you can't record.
Yeah.
Your phone dies.
Yeah, or something happens.
And that whole class is done.
And then you're done.
You never benefit again from that class.
So it's better to struggle early and then become better later on, and use the recording as like a backup sometimes here and there when you need it. Yeah.
Definitely. I think for a lot of students of knowledge, they don't know their level. They don't know where they're at, or some of them, they overestimate where they're at, or some of them they underestimate where they're at. Like lack of confidence, too much confidence, or just like pure ignorance. And speak to that concept of like, when should a person feel entitled to speak versus when should they feel entitled to be quiet? When should a person feel entitled to ask for evidence? Because one of the things I've dealt with is people who have no way of interacting with evidence, asking for evidence. Like, oh, what's the delete for that? I'm like, even if I told you the delete, you wouldn't know what to do with the delete. Like, if I lied to you right now and gave you a fake chat GPT, you know, hadith, you wouldn't know what to do with it. You know, how do you deal with stuff like that? You know, and in your experience, obviously, I'm sure you've had stuff like that happen to you where people, yeah.
I think somebody who has confidence and knowledge, that's problematic, because what confidence, like, the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be the opposite.
Right.
Usually people who are in their beginner stages of knowledge are the ones that have the most confidence. And they're very adamant about certain conclusions. But when you get into the deeper levels of knowledge, you start realizing these arguments, these back and forths are very, 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 very deep.
Right.
I'm not talking about issues that are clear cut.
Yeah.
In which there's a consensus or the majority, or even like, I'm talking about in more of the contentious issues. Yeah. Which people are passionate about. Yeah. So the more you learn, things, the more you realize you don't know. The more you realize this is a lot. There's strong arguments on both sides. Either way, it's like a tip. It could go either way. Yeah. The more you learn, the more you realize how jahil you are. Yeah. So people who have confidence, people who feel entitled to speak, they're usually beginners. That's right off the bat. Nobody should be speaking of knowledge unless their teachers or their community leaders or people like push them to do that.
Right.
Because of overall benefit.
Right.
But even then, somebody should not put themselves forward all the time.
Right.
They should. And experience is something that's important.
Yeah.
And being around knowledge for a long time is also important. All right, that's why Shafi'i says, a long time. You have to be around knowledge for a long time because you learn a lot of different things. Yeah. You change opinions over time. You start to realize that this is bigger than what it really is. So I think this is the concept is that a person should just continue learning.
Yeah.
The longer you continue learning, the more you realize actually your confidence starts to decrease.
Yeah. Keep
until you realize I'm nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
When you see those mountains,
you see those mountains, like, whoa, what's going on? Like, what did I do? I'm just another guy. And then you stop taking yourself serious.
Right.
Yeah. In the sense that you don't.
Right.
Yeah. And that's when the person actually reaches true.
Yeah.
That's when they truly.
That's when you reach real enlightenment. Is when you find out you're not enlightened.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So it's the opposite of whatever we think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But then with regards to the dalil thing, can you answer to that? Just the concept of people asking for evidences. I know, like, with your background in fiqh and, like teaching fiqh to students and stuff like that, the concept of people saying, well, what's the dalil for this? Or, and they don't know how to interact. Like, that's the point. You don't know how to interact with the dalil. So what should you do in that position if you're in that type of position?
I don't think it's wrong for somebody who's a seeker of knowledge or somebody from the masses to ask for evidences. I think that's pretty good. It's better than just taking everything at face value.
Right.
Whether the person understands or doesn't understand, you can provide them the evidence.
Yeah.
If they don't understand it, then they realize it's deeper than what it is. If they understand it, then alhamdulillah. But I think you're probably talking to people who only think that dalils come in the form of a hadith or an ayah.
Yeah.
An ayah is pretty obvious.
Right.
But like hadith is what they look at.
Exactly.
Which is completely wrong because there's different types of evidence.
There's
logical evidences, there's transmitted evidences, dalil aqli, dalil naqli. There's different types of evidences.
Right.
So many different types of evidences. There's evidences in fiqh, there's different evidences in lugha. Which ilm are we talking about?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's wrong for them to ask for evidences.
Right.
If they can't understand what an evidence is, then that actually should motivate them to learn.
Right.
All right? And you motivate them to learn. And if they understand it, alhamdulillah, then they should move on with it. Right. Now, another thing is, you might have a issue in which people differ in, but one side has an evidence, but you never looked at the other side and their evidence.
Right. You've been taught
that side of the evidence.
That you asked.
So they might have 2 good evidences, but those guys have 7 evidences that are even stronger when you look at it.
Exactly.
So these kind of things is very important. So I don't think it's bad.
Yeah.
I
don't think it's bad either.
There is a balance, right?
Right.
You can't learn evidences in the beginning. You have to learn the theoretical side. All right. They say أول العلم التعليق ثم التدليل ثم التعليل. Like, you learn the theoretical issues and then you learn its evidences. Then you learn the reasons why they differ.
The reason behind the evidence and
why and all that.
Yeah.
That's the 3 stages of knowledge.
Yeah.
But if somebody at the beginning stages wants to jump to stage 2 or 3 without understanding stage 1, that's problematic. Yeah. But if he just wants to have an idea, it's good to have early exposure just to have an idea.
Right.
But if a person just completely skips stage 1 and wants to go to stage 2 and listen, I want to learn ilm straight from hadith or straight from qiyas, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
You're not going to be built as a seeker of knowledge.
Yeah.
So
you haven't gone through the necessary steps to get to that point, because that's an end point.
Yes.
That's an end point. And it's all journey, like talabul ilm.
Yes,
that's why the parables that come in the hadith about talabul ilm is that it's a journey. Man salaka tariqan, in terms of, you might not travel, but you might go through the journey your whole life in one city, because you're journeying through seeking knowledge, tatawwur, growth, tadrij, and all this stuff. Is really interesting. I think, Sheikh, also one of the things that in my experience that I've seen a lot of students of knowledge go through is a lot of this I don't want to call it tribalism, territorial kind of thing. We talked about this before, where people feel ideologies are them and they're the ideology, and they can't separate themselves from being like seeing a critique of something that they believe very hardly about, whether it's something in fiqh or it's something in aqidah or something in like, whatever it is, they think something or they've taught something, and then when that thing is challenged, they kind of feel, how does a person prepare themselves for, because like you said, the more you learn, the more you find out differences. So how does one prepare themselves for? Because if I'm a beginner, and you're scaring me right now, and you tell me there's gonna be differences of opinion, I'm scared. I don't know if I will still want to learn anymore because I like what I like. I like what I believe. You know, how does a person prepare for that? You know, how do they put on their big boy pants, right?
Yeah. I think world we live in, we've just been exposed to difference of opinion. Yeah. We already know that because of social media.
Right.
So before, yes, you could say, okay, maybe exposing other ideas might not be beneficial to the beginner in the beginning. But today's a different world. Yeah. Like, that person's going to hear it online, hear it somewhere else.
But I think the difference, there's a slight difference. And that difference is when you do hear it today and you believe in something, it's easier for you to see that and brush it off. Be like, this guy's just, he's talking like those guys that I don't agree with, right? But once you get to the level of learning, then you're like, wait a minute, those guys that I didn't agree with actually have some real, some real fuel behind their, you know what I'm saying, their movement. And I think actually maybe I might start identifying with this. And then you reconcile. You have to you have the moment like, yo, am I actually leaving what I used to believe behind? Am I changing my thoughts? Like, you get my point.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. There's a fine line, though. There's a fine line. But it's good for a person to be objective when they're learning. When they start learning, it's good for them to be objective and have it in terms of certain issues. And then it's also good to have certain boundaries when it comes to certain jurisprudential, especially creedal issues. Yeah. It's good to have those boundaries because those boundaries kind of protect you until you get to a level where you can have an understanding. In the beginning, it's better for the person to shut their ears from all these controversies, focus on the what is known, the normal schools of thoughts that we know, the four myths.
Stay orthodox. Stay with the orthodox.
Stay with the orthodox.
Learn your left, right layups. Learn your basic jump shot. Don't get into the...
Once you get to a certain level where you have exposure, then now you have boundaries that you operate from. It's a framework you operate from. Right. But you also can what? You could also critique and also look into other matters. But you have to get to that level. Right. But being too objective is going to get you confused. Being too ideological and territorial, like you said, usually those people, they never get to that second level. They never get to the second gear. They still stay in the first gear. They're
governed.
They're still under 30 miles an hour. Right?
They never got on the highway.
They never got on the highway.
That makes sense.
They never got on the highway.
That makes sense,
And they never want to exit too.
They never want to get on the highway.
they never want to get on, right? So that's the problem.
That makes sense.
So, but when you want to get on the highway, you got to make sure you're able to go to gear 2, gear 3, gear 4. But also you got to have an exit. You can't just stay on the highway.
You can't stay on the highway.
There has to be boundaries because there's a fine line between what is the correct opinion and that is truth is not relative. There is an ultimate truth. And then there are some matters that are just going to be ambiguous. It's hard to know the truth. Yeah. But whatever Allah blesses you with in terms of ilm, then you should look for it to the best of your ability. Allah Allah.
I like the concept of boundaries. This is just a question to follow up on the concept of boundaries. For like, inshallah, there's probably going to be some students. From what, the people that contacted me that watched the podcast, there are people who are in universities right now, people who are going to graduate and be in da'wah roles. And so how do you set boundaries within da'wah? That's my question. How do you set boundaries for yourself that this doesn't take too much of your time, or that you're respected in the field of da'wah, or that, just like that you, when you're out there and you're teaching or these kinds of things, that you demand, you don't have to demand it, but you command the respect that is required for a person of your caliber, a person who's learned it or graduated or now is in a position, because obviously, like you said, no one should feel entitled, but when you put in 6, 7 years, 10 years, 13 years, 15 years of education into something, you're an expert, or you're at least a person who knows, and you're not like the guy who just started. There's a difference of level. Where do you build those boundaries, within the da'wah, within organizationals, like different organizations, and working with them and all that stuff? How do you for those students that are going to be getting into the real world?
Yeah. Allah alam and Allah knows best, but I think maybe I would take a different route. I would say that I think no matter what, a person has to have a level where they start from. There has to be a base that you operate from, that you start from. Right. No matter how much a person studies and how long they study, respect is earned and never given. Okay. you may be experienced on the theoretical side, but you're not experienced in the real world, in the practical side.
Like I said, you haven't gone to the real world.
Somebody might have a bachelor's degree in engineering, then go on to a master's in engineering, but never worked an engineering job a day in their lives. They're starting an entry level job.
Right.
I think a lot of people who study for a long time, they're very self entitled. Just because they studied, they think they should be what?
They should be.
They got to start from the bottom.
Right.
You know, the concept of rookie hazing is something it's very important.
It's important.
You got to start from the bottom.
In every field.
Respect in every field.
Yeah.
So why is every field, right? You see a professional athlete.
Right.
He put in 10, 15 years.
You're a rookie.
He got drafted.
Right.
He's still on the bench.
Yeah.
You got to start on the bench. So respect is earned and not given. And anybody who tries to, there's too many people that are self-entitled. Actually, I would say the majority are self-entitled, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So that's the mentality a person got to have.
Right. So
a person shouldn't say, 6, 7 years you're an expert. You're only an expert on one side, and that is theoretical. And even then, that's question mark, because you just put in the time.
Yeah.
But did the results...
Yeah, do we even know
you? Do we even know, like, you know?
Do you even know?
And then you have no experience.
Yeah.
You have no experience in a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have theoretical knowledge.
Yeah.
But have you applied it?
Yeah, practical.
Have you spread it?
Right.
You have very minimal experience. You might have done doses here and there, but you haven't done that full time.
Yeah.
Build up some experience.
You haven't, also, like, I think for da'wah, there's a lot of, like you said, there's the human capital, the creating people. Yeah. You know, like, a lot of du'at, I think maybe, you know, in this wording, it might not sound the best, but a lot of people, they take the best and easiest route, the easier route, which is to sit in front of a camera or a group of people and do a lecture. That's, I think, much easier than having a class full of 10 or 12 or 13 people that are now connected, that constantly come back to you for lessons, and now you have to do, you know, you have to give them adab, you have to actually teach them, and you have to, you know, give them tarbiyah and bring them from zero to hero, inshallah ta'ala, to where they can be, they can, I think that's harder, and I think maybe you can speak to that, because we talked about that before, just that you know.
Oh, definitely, that's harder. That's hard. Human beings are high maintenance.
Right.
Dealing with them is hard. Giving tell
when you give a lecture, you leave is different.
You get a lecture and bounce is easy. You just put on the camera, start whenever I want. Exactly. 6 a.m., 4 a.m., 12. Now you got to deal with timings. You got to deal with people's patience. You got to have somebody. You got
absences. People not coming no more.
Yeah, you got to deal with
class stagnating.
Yeah, but there's also benefits. Like one, they're not both mutually exclusive. Each one has a benefit.
Yeah.
Like one is more community building, and the other one is more spreading of knowledge.
Yeah.
But some people, they use that as a way to brand themselves and not to spread knowledge. And what's the last hadith we just read? We just read Riyadh al-Salihin, hadith of Hurairah, Muslim, right?
Yeah.
The scholar who is spreading knowledge.
I read it for your sake.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's kadhabta. You did read, but it wasn't for
that reason. So imagine, that's the last hadith we heard just before we walked in.
SubhanAllah.
And we just, like, imagine. So some people,
We'll close off the podcast with 2 questions.
Yeah.
Inshallah ta'ala. The first one's kind of a curveball. I'm already preparing you. This was no longer a curveball. I already told you I'm curving the ball.
Okay, let's get a change up or a fastball.
Maybe a fastball. Khair, inshallah. What's the worst advice you've ever gotten? Curveball. Told you, right?
Worst advice?
Worst advice you've ever gotten. With regards to maybe talab, or just like, you know, mutlaqan. What's the worst advice? Like somebody gave you this advice, they thought they was cooking, but you were like, nah, man, the stove is off. Like
something I realized at the moment or later on?
Maybe realize in the moment, maybe later on. I think later on is always better, because you know, you're like, yeah, that guy was tripping, man. I'm glad I didn't follow his advice.
I gotta think about that.
Think about it, inshallah.
I gotta think about
Should I give you the second question? What's the best advice you ever got? So maybe you can...
You know, you confuse me more. But the worst advice that I've got, like in terms of seeking knowledge, you mean?
Let's keep it at that.
Or in general, it's just like that's just a C.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that people tell every day.
Say.
Yeah, you run into an old head here and there, and they'll just tell you some random stuff, and you're like, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. You did that, didn't you? That's why. Right. Talab al-ilm, inshallah.
In terms of seeking knowledge, the worst advice is... I got to think about that. What was the second question again?
The best advice you got.
The best advice?
Yeah.
The best advice that I've gotten is that in the beginning of seeking knowledge, you have this enormous zeal. that zeal will run out. Once you run out that zeal, you're going to look at your life, you're going to reflect. Should I continue this?
Yeah.
What's the end of the world look like? You start seeing there's not a lot of benefits.
Right.
Especially in the dunya.
Yeah.
It's purely in the akhirah. So you start questioning yourself. Everybody's going to get to that point.
Someone's got to shake.
Yeah. When you get to that point,
right.
if you're able to pass that, that time period, and you get to the second level, you continue, then you have succeeded. Partially, obviously. Yeah. Just getting to that second level.
You've gotten through the.
So, I'm looking at this, and I'm hearing this, and this is before my zeal even kicked in. Oh. I don't even know what zeal he's talking about.
He's like, what does that
start? Then when he said zeal, I remember the zeal. And then when I got exactly how that Sheikh mentioned, so that was the best advice I got, because he already mentally
prepared you.
And then when you got there, I was like, oh, this is the thing that he was talking about. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, I got to make a decision. Yeah. And when you make that decision, sometimes the other decision of leaving is not really, it's not really a bad one, but it's being self-aware sometimes is important. Yeah. Some people, they just look it out and they're not doing anything. They're not doing talab ilm. Yeah. And they're not doing. So that was probably one of the best advices. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of
preemptive advice is always good. Like you get an advice about something that's to come, and then when you actually apply it, it's a good thing. A lot of time, like I remember, I got advice about like learning Arabic, and someone was like, "Yeah, you're gonna go through." And I always give people the same advice. You're gonna go through a moment where you're like plateauing. You think you know Arabic, but you actually don't know anything. But you also think that you've learned everything that you could learn in that moment. But then when you try to put it out, it's not there. And then you're actually growing a lot in the background. Similar advice is a lot of times, like, I haven't been to Umrah in a while, but every time I took a group of people to Umrah, I would always tell them, when you go back home, you're going to be tested like never before. There's always that post-Umrah, you get tested. You're like, new things start happening, and then, like, preparing that person for that test that's to come. If they take the advice, is always good. Rarely do people take advice to begin with. So, but yeah, worst advice.
I
gave you time to think.
I really wasn't thinking. I was in the conversation. I'm in a moment.
You're in the moment.
I'm in a moment. The worst advice.
Yeah.
Worst advice. I really can't think about. I could tell you what. I don't know what worst advice I got, but I could tell you bad advices that I hear from people.
Just bad advice,
I could just tell you a boatload of bad advice that I've been hearing from people. I don't know if I ever got it.
Yeah, I'm sure if you heard it, it might have it was a stray, that came towards your direction.
Maybe, perhaps,
right?
Perhaps. But I would say one of the bad advices that people give is figure things out on your own. You gotta have a mentor in secret knowledge. You gotta have a mentor. If you don't have a mentor, then you're gonna be lost. So I think that's anybody tells you figure it out on your own, right? Read on your own, do all that. No, those are independent studies that comes afterwards. Yeah, do it in the beginning is nice, but with a mentor. I think that's another bad advice that people give all the time is don't memorize. Yeah, just understand. But then at the end, if you have nothing memorized, what happens?
What did you understand?
What did you like? You don't even know. You
didn't memorize what you understood.
You didn't memorize the basics, right?
You can't remember what you understood.
Yeah.
You gotta have that istihdar.
You have to have that istihdar, and you have to have that, at least a base level. You don't have to memorize everything. Right. Another bad advice is when people just say, go to this class and go to this class, go to every class. You don't do that. You have to go to certain classes, right, that befit you at that particular moment. That doesn't mean the other class is not beneficial. It's not beneficial to you at this particular moment.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's bad advices. That people give sometimes. Yeah. Stuff like that. Yeah, I need something.
Concept's really interesting. Yeah. Jumping from class to class, people that do that, or people that don't finish what they start. Things like that.
So there's a lot of bad advice, and there's a lot of bad advices in life, and in general. Yeah. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just follow the recipes there. Don't
people done it before you.
People done it before you. كل من سار على الدرب وصل.
Exactly.
Just follow whatever's there from before. This recipe to success in every industry, in life in general, is there. Yeah. Just follow it. You just got to implement it. You don't have to come up with this whole new strategy and all this and trial and error. A lot of people, they have an ego.
Sheikh, you ever been to a park and you see like there's a sidewalk and the sidewalk is like straight and it goes left, and then like there's a patch of dirt in the grass that people's footsteps were on. You know, like you're like, this is the path everybody takes. I don't know why they built this. So there's actually a concept in civil engineering, like, you know, like where those paths, sometimes what they'll do is they'll actually build a sidewalk there. And then people still get on the grass. So, you know, so because that relates to what you're saying about the Khilafah Salah. It was like this. You see the path, you see yourself. Everybody went on the path. Everybody's going on the path. Now you're formulating it. Now you're making it into a thing. It's like now people like it's not cool anymore. No one wants to walk. We want to walk on the grass. You know?
Really, you want to do something else. Right. But a broken clock is right twice a day.
There you go.
That's the thing. So people see that one time, they were right, but it was only twice in 24 hours.
Right. Exactly. MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair for your time, Sheikh. In conclusion, maybe one final advice, inshallah. I know I said 2 questions. We're making a third, inshallah. One of the things that kills a student of knowledge, like you said, is the zeal runs out, right? And there's two things that are different. One is like having ulu, having high aspirations, and then having sustained level of, you know, fuel to keep going, right? We're going back to the oil thing, the fuel, but like having the fuel. What are some things maybe that, you know, unique things? I know there's a lot of stuff that people say normally. Maybe we can get something unique from your perspective in terms of keeping the fuel, keeping going, keeping the foot on the gas with talab al-ilm. What would you give advice to that?
Sa'a wa sa'a. Sa'a wa sa'a. It's very clear. Like, be consistent in your production and be consistent in having time off so that you can have longevity. Right. So that's important. Taking advantage of the times in which you have a lot of zeal is good, but also don't run it out too much so the fuel doesn't run out. So having that balance. I always say, like, if you're going to study, for example, if somebody's studying full time, they probably go 5-6 days a week and maybe a day off. Yeah. They go for 3 months and then take a week off. Stuff like that. You know, having breaks in between, having times to take out, but not too long where they forget everything they studied. Right. That's another problem. And somebody who's part-time, you know, they seek knowledge on a part-time basis. They do it on a weekly basis, but sometimes they take off. That's very important. Sa'a wa sa'a. But I would also add, a lot of people, they don't even know why they're seeking knowledge. They're just doing it because everybody else is doing it.
That's true.
Like, why are you seeking knowledge? Yeah. What's the purpose? And then, if you get this knowledge, what are you going to do with it? Are you just going to pass it on? Yeah. Is that really the only goal? Yeah. Or is it supposed to be implemented and practiced in society? The theology behind learning has been confined to just classrooms. Yeah. When in reality it's supposed to be a way of life. Right. How is that supposed to be implemented into a way of life? People don't even do that, and they don't even think about that. So the mindset is completely wrong. It's not supposed to be, I learned this and just pass it on. Yeah. That's only one form. One form of the culture. The culture. That's one part. You have to implement it in society at large. Right. In different, you know, socially, politically, spiritually. That's how it's supposed to be. Yeah. But we don't do that. So, and that goes back. In the masjid, in the circle, in the halaqah, khalas. And that's it. Yeah. And that's, yes, that's good to a certain degree, but that's not enough. So people don't know why. And people also, they go into it because everybody else is going into it. And this is a problem that even those who have been in knowledge for a long time, they struggle with. So I think that's also very, very important that the like you seeker said, of knowledge... on the highway, don't know where the exit is. They don't know where the exit is, yes. They don't know where they're... Or they don't have a roadmap. Yeah. You gotta have a roadmap. No GPS. No GPS whatsoever. You have to have it. First of all, it has to affect you in your personal life spiritually. And then it has to affect society at large. Like that is the methodology of the prophets. The prophets weren't just dealing with people who are what? Confined to certain backgrounds. That's not the methodology of the prophets. The prophets were, in one sense, you could say, a form of populace, in the sense that they were for the people. They were helping all types of people. It wasn't just one strand of people. Right. If you get what I mean. Right. Exactly. And in this side, you could say you can say that
it wasn't a niche. It wasn't.
It was a niche.
Yeah.
And you can't. You know how they say certain political ideologies they cater towards the rich.
Yeah.
I think this is similar in terms of if you consider the rich people the seekers of knowledge.
Yeah.
Knowledge has been confined to the rich.
To the rich, exactly.
And that is completely incorrect.
There's no trickle down.
It doesn't trickle down. There isn't. You know what I mean?
It's staying up.
It's staying up.
Top 1% is keeping all the wealth.
keep the wealth in the 1%. So keep it in the family.
Middle class revolution.
You need a lower class and middle class. عبس وتولى.
Oh my God. See that's gonna be the that's gonna be the name of this trip. that came up so much. Sheikh, Jazakallah khair for your time. May Allah bless you. Barakallah feek. We appreciated you having you. We hope to have you again, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Allah yabarak feek. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.